Okay, today's rumor is an exciting one, especially for lifelong Zelda fans or new Zelda fans that want to be exposed to one of the series' best and most impactful games, period. You could even argue it might be the most impactful game in gaming ever, and that is, of course, The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And now, thanks to some claims from an increasingly more reliable source that we will break down his track record in just a moment in terms of recent reveals, but it now sounds like this might be quite a bit of a broader project than once imagined. And of course, if Nintendo's going to revisit this game again, you would expect them to really bring it into the modern day with top tier visuals and some gameplay improvements, and maybe even some reworked story and new elements within said game. And ultimately, when and if we do see this thing officially revealed, we should be expecting a much broader project than that of something like a 3DS remake that we have already seen Nintendo do with Grezzo in the past on the 3DS. So we're going to break down all of this info, but before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And with that, I want to first take a moment to examine the source that we are reporting on here, which is none other than Nash Weedle. And while once upon a time I was more on the fence on if Nash Weedle had inside information, there has been too many things now in recent memory, and going back to some of their big stuff in the past that they got right before its official reveal, the title and reveal time of Metroid Dread before we learned about that game officially. You can look into their own posts and verify that that did take place. A very strong tease at a Mario and Luigi game coming back shortly before Brothership was officially announced. Multiple Nintendo Switch 2 functionality patents, Elden Ring the Tarnished Edition getting the exact naming of that game headed to Nintendo Switch correctly. Various other third-party Nintendo Switch ports that we have now seen officially confirmed, like Assassin's Creed Shadows, amongst others. And one of the big notable ones that really put them back on my radar in terms of moving them up the trust scale for me is this exact post that you can see posted up on March 29th before the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct, where he says, "I'll tell you what's happening on the dark side of the internet. It's been said for days that the new 3D Mario won't be coming this year, but Donkey Kong will be the star. I can't tell you about 3D Mario, but I've already told you about Donkey, and I'm looking forward to seeing it." And of course, what was the big game at the Nintendo Switch 2 Hardware Direct when many people were expecting a 3D Mario game to be featured, and it was none other than the big DK Bonanza that we now know to expect. So between that and there is a history with Ocarina of Time Remake being teased by Mr. Aonuma himself, and you might recall there is something of a pattern with Aonuma shutting down in interviews a direct question for, is this game going to be remade, or will we ever see a Zelda Dungeon Maker? And he'll just straight up say, we're not doing that, or there is no plans. And he has another pattern of responses when there are games that are in the pipeline with a laugh, a chuckle, no comment. And we have all of those interview signs pointing towards that of an Ocarina of Time remake when Mr. Aonuma has been asked about it in recent memory. Not to mention, he has teased multiple times that he doesn't know if the current fan base of The Legend of Zelda actually knows key characters like Rauru, who of course is prominently featured in Tears of the Kingdom and the upcoming Hyrule Warriors Age of Imprisonment, but he's questioning whether or not it's been so long that the new generation doesn't know of Raru's significance in a game like Ocarina of Time. Okay, so where are we headed with all of this? Well, recently, a fellow content creator on the platform by the name of Attack the Backlog had Nash Weedle on for a podcast. I will have it linked in my description down below under the sources section, so please go check it out. It is in Spanish, however, there are subtitles provided, and via translation, we have these exact quotes from Nash Weedle in terms of an Ocarina of Time remake. So he says, "So anyway, the last thing, sorry, about Zelda, remember a couple years ago, last year maybe, I mentioned before anyone else that they were starting a remake of Ocarina of Time, and people went crazy. It's coming, but patience, people think games are made overnight. I even know that. Well, I can't say much, but some people were asked to submit their reimagined artistic vision of the game. So I think that's what's happening. That was like a year and a half ago, so it's going to take time. And this is the big part. Do you think it will be done by Nintendo themselves? Because wasn't it Grezzo that did the 3DS remake? I think it was Grezzo. I've heard it's Nintendo this time. That would sell like crazy. Oh yeah, and that would be huge. And who knows, maybe it'll release around the same time as the movie. I don't think so, but 2027 is the release, right? The Mario sequel is 2026 and Zelda is 2027, right? Okay, so this is clearly still rumor territory and not any form of confirmation that we are getting Ocarina of Time remake, but I do think that having a source as reliable as we've seen in Nash Weedle with predictions and leaks recently, chiming in on this once again and just stating that he's heard that an artistic vision was changed recently, like as far as a year and a half ago, for a game like this, and the biggest thing to me, that it's being developed directly by Nintendo. If that is the case and to be believed, we don't know exactly when this game might come out, maybe a late holiday 2026 title or into 2027, but I do think that it stands to reason that Nintendo is going to want to get something Zelda quicker out on the Nintendo Switch 2 console than what it is going to take them to develop the next true mainline 3D Zelda, and there is a chance that they have an entire internal team or a section of the Zelda developers working on this Ocarina of Time remake in-house, and they can of course still have their other branch of developers working on the next major brand new 3D Zelda. But while games do take time and you can't rush these things, I do tend to believe that with Ocarina of Time being a supposed remake of some sort where you have the entire structure of the game essentially laid out minus any enhancements that Nintendo wants to make to the progression or the combat, or maybe even give us an additional temple like the Sky Temple or something, which would be crazy, and maybe that doesn't happen. But Nintendo supposedly developing this game in-house does really open up those possibilities to a whole nother level. And if you look at their overall Zelda history release schedule, it's just when they launch a new console, we typically don't have to wait too long into that console's life cycle before we get something major that is Zelda from Nintendo on it. And of course we had Echoes of Wisdom towards the end of the Switch's life cycle, but they are going to want to show off something for the Switch 2 that truly takes advantage of the visuals. A 3D Ocarina of Time remake could absolutely do that, and they're going to want to have something for that now, 20 and 30 million unit sellers of juggernaut games of Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. Like, that's a whole new generation of Zelda fans potentially sitting on the sidelines waiting to pick up this console until something Zelda is released for it. And I do think that Ocarina of Time remake makes the most sense at this point in time to potentially re-release. Not to mention we do have Zelda's 40th anniversary coming up in 2026, and that will be at the beginning of the year. But mind you, Nintendo is known for celebrating anniversaries within the year that they happen, so it could even be a early 2027 game and still technically be within that 40th anniversary celebration. It also might not be tied to any kind of anniversary celebration, but I do think that with one of those monumental games that shaped the form of 3D gaming in just such a huge way, that this is one that Nintendo will revisit again and not just leave it on a 3DS, which of course is an excellent console, but you only play that handheld. I think they want to give you that big screen 4K experience with something like a modern day Ocarina of Time, and I think it's the game that makes the most sense from a sales and business perspective, in addition to just throwing something out on the Switch 2 in the Legend of Zelda franchise early on, not Hyrule Warriors spin-off, but rather a mainline Zelda game. And it's been long enough now for a game like Ocarina of Time that it can be reimagined and reinvented. Just look at what we're seeing take place with games like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth. And I certainly hope Nintendo doesn't split this up into 3 different parts. I don't think that they would, but it could be that kind of reimagining in some elements of the game or even story of the game, where they actually kind of change some core things that are there, or give far more context, or give different character perspectives than we've ever seen before. Like, instead of just taking the game and upgrading the visuals like what we saw with the 3DS version and some minor gameplay tweaks, let's go all out. And if it's Nintendo in-house, I think there's a solid shot that they do that. So This is a near and dear one to my heart. I certainly hope we see some kind of confirmation of it soon. I do actually think it's one of those games that might be a far ways out, but Nintendo would reveal it early like they historically do with Zelda games. Of course, we're talking mainly the next mainline 3D Zelda games get this type of early tease, but I think something as big as Ocarina of Time Remake could be teased a year or more well in advance from when it releases, with maybe just the release year or no release year for the first trailer, and then we get some more concrete timeline around it as we get closer. But let me know in the comments down below what, if anything, you are hoping to see with an Ocarina of Time remake, and do you think it is indeed a real project that Nintendo is cooking as we speak? Would you like to see them add anything to the game in terms of content and story elements, or do you think they need to faithfully recreate it one-to-one once again with the original game? And if you had to guess a year on what you think is most likely for this game to come to market, what year do you think that is? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also, make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell. And with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.